As far as his troops were concerned, General Menendez decided first of all to concentrate his efforts round his headquarters in Port Stanley. By now, he had about 12,000 men on the islands. He knew the British would have nothing like that number, and anyway, he was expecting the main attack to come against Stanley itself.
A fire and bomb going off. We were astonished that metal ships could burn with such fury, but she didn't die easily. At the other end of the island in Port Stanley, Argentine troops were celebrating their Independence Day.
Festejamos nuevamente la fecha patria.
At Government House, General Menendez, the commander of the Argentine troops on the islands, had sent a message home as soon as he heard that British troops had landed. Be assured, he told President Galtieri, that all the men are fighting well and their combat morale is high. And so, at the start at least, was discipline.
Subordinación y valor.
Another warship, HMS Coventry, is lost with 20 of her crew, and Argentine missiles knock out the supply ship Atlantic Conveyor. 4 of her crew are dead. The British task force has lost 2 more ships. 24 crewmen have been killed and over 20 others injured. These latest casualties were inflicted by Argentine air attacks yesterday on a destroyer north of West Falkland and a supply ship believed to be heading for the Port San Carlos beachhead. The destroyer lost in the attack was HMS Coventry. She was hit by bombs and most of the casualties were from her crew. The container ship Atlantic Conveyor was hit by Exocet missiles, like those that sank HMS Sheffield earlier this month. She'd been carrying Harriers, but they'd been taken off before the ship was abandoned. The Prime Minister said the new losses wouldn't break the government's resolve. Britain knew the hazards of war. Mrs. Thatcher made her remarks at a conference of Conservative women in London.
Our hearts go out to all those families who had men in these ships. But despite these grievous losses, neither our resolve nor our confidence is weakened.
In the Commons, the Defence Secretary, Mr. Nott, said that our forces on the Falklands were now poised to begin their thrust on Port Stanley, despite the losses of ships and men caused by Argentine air attacks. MPs were silent as he described yesterday's attacks and the casualties suffered.
At approximately 7:30 London time, a further raid of Skyhawks approached HMS Coventry. She was hit by several bombs and suffered severe damage. She later capsized. Initial casualty figures are that 20 members of her crew died in the attack, and about 20 were injured, and the remainder of her crew of some 280 are safe on board other ships of the task force. After this attack on HMS Coventry, at about 8:30, Atlantic Conveyor, a merchant navy ship protected by escorts and employed in the resupply task, was attacked by 2 Super Étendard aircraft which fired Exocet missiles. She was hit and set on fire. She was loaded with supplies for British forces on the Falkland Islands. She had no Harriers embarked. In this attack, 4 of those on board Atlantic Conveyor were killed and a small number were injured. The remainder of those 170 who were on board are now safe on other ships.
John Knott was at pains to steady nerves in a sad and subdued house. When a setback occurred, he said there was always a danger of undue pessimism, just as success sometimes produced needless euphoria. He warned against both. Generally, the military objectives had gone exactly as ministers had planned, though we'd had losses and there might be more on land and sea. Mr. Knott was pressed by several Conservatives to take action against the Argentine mainland. He replied that this wouldn't shorten the conflict, and he implied that bombing the air bases wasn't militarily feasible. Mr. Knott promised John Silken for Labour to keep every diplomatic avenue open in order to minimise casualties, but he told David Owen of the SDP that the Argentines showed no sign of wanting a peaceful settlement. Tony Benn asked how many more lives the government thought it sensible to lose before it went to the UN for a ceasefire. Mr. Knott said he didn't think it sensible to lose one extra life, but the military action was to free the Falkland Islanders. The exchanges ended with an angry scene between the Speaker, George Thomas, and a Labour MP, Andrew Falls, who was ordered to leave the House for disobeying the chair. Mr. Falls accused Mr. Thomas of refusing to accept speakers who were opposed to what he called this lunatic operation, but the House backed the Speaker by 277 votes to 27.
The latest damage to the Coventry and Atlantic Conveyor brings to 5 the number of British vessels lost or out of action. One other ship, the destroyer Broadsword, was slightly damaged in yesterday's attack, but there were no casualties. Here's our defence correspondent, Christopher Wayne.
We had a good morning, they had a good afternoon. That's how one senior official at Whitehall put it today. And that good afternoon for the Argentine Air Force knocked out 2 more ships. Of the 2, the Atlantic Conveyor was the more important, for she was hit while she was on her way to the San Carlos beachhead, laden down with stores. The Atlantic Conveyor had been requisitioned from Cunard to carry RAF Harrier jets to the Falklands, and according to the Defence Ministry, all those jump jets had already been flown off. But there were thousands of tons of other stores, including some helicopters which were in crates. Again, the Defence Ministry stressed the loss of the ship won't cripple the task force. Indeed, it could have been worse. The Argentine pilots who launched the Exocets may have thought they had one of the British carriers in their sights. Given the choice, they might have preferred to hang on to those missiles. The loss of HMS Coventry was the result of an ambush by Argentine Skyhawks. They'd come from the south at low level, hidden by radar view from the landmass. As a result, the Coventry failed to detect the planes in time to use her Sea Dart missiles. Earlier in the day, she'd shot down 2 out of 4 Skyhawks coming in to bomb the beachhead. But caught as she was in open water, the Argentine pilots were able to get a clear bombing run. The battle being fought by the thin grey line of British warships trying to hold off Argentine attacks is one which requires a lot of discipline. Without that gun line, the Argentine planes would have been able to decimate the supply ships in San Carlos water. So far, the line has lost 3 warships but gained 10 reinforcements. And they won't need to hold on much longer. The bulk of the heavy stores have now been landed, and the troop reinforcements on QE2 are on their way.
The latest Argentine claims say that in yesterday's battle they damaged 3 British warships and a transport ship and shot down 3 Harriers. And they've released a photograph taken by an attacking Argentine pilot said to show a British frigate at the moment bombs hit. There's no indication which ship it was. Today, the Argentine President, General Galtieri, has been visiting bases in the south of the country and meeting representatives of the Pope. This report from Clive Ferguson.
Galtieri's morale-boosting trip to Comodoro Rivadavia in the south of the country coincided with the latest news of the loss of 2 British ships. An official communique issued while the Argentine President was in the middle of his visit claimed that both the Coventry and the Atlantic Conveyor had sunk. Earlier, Argentina claimed that Sea Harriers attacked an Argentine ship off the Falkland Islands. 1 Argentine was killed and 2 were wounded in the attack, the statement said. It also claimed that 1 Harrier had been shot down.